All right. How's everyone doing today? Good?
You bet.
Awesome. Well, fire away. Let's roll.
Andy, you've talked a lot about, off-season prep for Big 12 teams and things like that. I wonder how much changes by one game, right? You've seen them play Pitt now, and do you have to, or do you choose to deviate from what you learned over the summer about West Virginia? And all
Well, it's a unique game plan because, you got to remember for us, it was 2 games ago that we had just played them. And, it was 3 games ago for them. So there's some, okay, what'd you do? What'd they do? Right? Okay. What they do in their bowl game, what they do in their first game, what did we do? And there's some, a little bit of evaluation of things that you confirmed and things that you saw last year, game planning, and, things in your self-scout that you go through in the summer. So it's a little unique, but it's, nothing that you don't prepare for, right, in the sense of what you do, because you're going to, I've mentioned in here before about everything, about how you have to evolve, and you have to evolve as a team, and every game you play, you're evolving. You're learning about your players, you're learning about your opponent, you're learning about your current players' strengths and weaknesses, and how they compare to your upcoming opponent. So you're always, going into a week of preparation, really thoroughly evaluating what you feel like you need to do to try to win a football game.
What did you like most about your offense week 1, and what do you want to see most in week 2?
I think when you look into really college football in general, when you play first game, there's always first game mistakes that occur. And a lot of them come in the form of delay of games and sloppy procedure penalties and, not too many guys or not enough guys in the field. And so for us, in the first game, to be pretty clean, is a testament to our kids and the other position coaches and how they went about preparing themselves to do those sort of things, which is what the expectation should be, right? We should be able to expect to get that stuff done the right way. There's always significant improvement typically from week 1 to week 2 if you allow yourself to really focus on, what you needed to improve on from week 1, because there's a lot of, at least in my experience 2 years of coaching, there's a lot of things that happen in the game where sometimes you go and you say, see, we talked about this and then it came up. Or, hey, you understand now what I mean when we talk this way, or why we have to get lined up like this. And there wasn't a ton of that in our first game, so I'm happy and pleased with how that looked. But now we're going into a different environment, we're going on the road, and so we have to make sure that's another challenge, another distraction that we have to be able to center our focus on what we do in our huddle and how we communicate what we do.
Lance talked yesterday about how he felt that even though there's, I think, 2 games difference between last season and now, but the West Virginia team you guys are going to play looks a lot different. I guess, would you agree with that? And what differences, I guess, do you see from them?
Yep, I think so. When you, defensively, there are some newer faces that are on there, okay, but when you watch them play, there's still some Big 12 talent, right, in that group. And then you look at, and I hope that they would say the same thing about a lot of our guys, is that when you look at the players that you played a year ago, those players that you're playing again, they look a year older. The things that come with being a year older, the physical maturation, the understanding the game, the getting lined up, all that kind of stuff. So, it was 3 games ago, but how many months, right? 8, 9, 10, whatever it is. I can't do my math very well, but there's growth. I think I'm in both teams.
And for you in the run game in particular, I guess, how would you assess the way the offensive line run blocked on Friday?
Pretty good. I don't even know what the stats were, honestly, but it was good. I think our yards per rush were pretty solid. Of course, you rip off a big one, that's going to skew the numbers a little bit, but it was good. We had hats on hats, and give our running backs a chance to have some green grass and make some people miss, which, that there was evidence of that occurring on last Friday night. So I'm pleased, but, I'm sure Coach has said, and I'll say 1,000 times, it's another opponent right now that we're going to play. So I'm excited about the test that we're about to take.
Going into a road game like this, you've talked a lot about wanting to be balanced and kind of take what the defense gives, but how important is it to be able to run the ball in a place like this when you got the crowd and everything like that?
Any game that you play, I think that's critically important, right? I don't think I shouldn't say that. I'm sure some people really maybe philosophically are like, we're okay with trying to throw the ball 100% of the time, but there's still a really physical element to football, and we want to embrace that. We want to thrive in that environment. That's who we want to be. And so, in order for anyone's success, I think you need to be able to establish a run game, at least efficiently. And so for us last week to be able to have some explosive plays and to do that, it's a good first step in our journey here this year.
In your offense, I mean, given where this program still is, are you approaching things of, hey, let's control the clock, let's shorten the game, let's ground and pound it out and play that to our advantage, or have you moved past that?
Well, I don't know if I'd ever say that you move past that, because I think how an offense controls a game, time management is maybe one metric that somebody would use to do that, right? Staying on the field, keeping your defense off the field. At the end of the day, and I've talked about this before, our evolution needs to be on offense to make sure that we're finishing those drives, however they look, right? And that we need to, the most important metric in football that people measure is your points per possession, right? And then when you're on the field, you need to finish with points. And that's what we want to do. If it takes 20 plays to go do that, fantastic. If it takes one, great, right? But we want to be able to end those things with touchdowns. And so every opponent that you play, there's a recipe to win the game, right? Right? And sometimes that recipe might be, let's try to control the ball. Let's try to stay in the field. And how does that look, right? Sometimes that might be, hey, you'll be able to stay in the field for X number of plays, but you're going to have a big play potential to follow that up, right? So whatever that is for an opponent that you would face every week, it might be a little bit different. But generally speaking, you want to make sure that you're finishing the drives with points. You really do.
Sure. And maybe a little Captain Obvious question, but the idea of having so many backs when you're trying to control clock and do what you just talked about, how much does that help, having many guys you can plug in there?
Well, fantastic, because in theory, right, everyone should be stay pretty fresh. You could go on one of these long drives, and we've been on 20-play drives before, right? You know what I mean? And how many of those end up being run? Let's say a dozen of them or whatever. If all of a sudden fresh legs come in every 3 carries, that's good. That can be tough on a defense, right? It can be real tough. So.
Kai Thomas won bowl game MVP for Minnesota against West Virginia last year. Is that something where you pick his brain at all about what worked, or is that just too different of a situation?
Yeah, a little bit. You have those discussions a little bit, but I think, you're going back into, learning a new offense and all these sort of things. And so, I think he's played enough football. He's smart enough to, recognize maybe the differences and what that game was, at least in the offense that he had been into now. But, matter of fact, I just said, hey, I was watching film again, and every time I was, hey, that's you, and so kind of he chuckles, I remember that play, and so, talking about that, maybe a little bit to what the point was made before about, there are some new faces, on that side of the ball defensively, and they evolved too, right? Since whenever that game was played, how many months ago, there's been evolution for sure in their personnel, just like ours.
I want to get your opinion on the start of games. I know some offensive coordinators do the scripting first 15. Some want to just kind of let it roll. I guess where do you kind of stand with that in starting games offensively?
Well, you have a game plan, right? And you want to start games, and you want to start with success, right? So you want to be able to, play to your strengths as an offense with the personnel you have. I know those things sound obvious, and how that compares to what the opponent you're facing, and their strengths and weaknesses, the defenses. So you want to be able to have some success. Certainly, you're going into games with a plan to say, hey, maybe we're going to line up a certain way and see how they adjust to this and how they would react, and which I've used termed the phrase before, complementary football. How do those things go as the game evolves? So to start, it's about what do we want to do to be successful, right? What do we think is going to work? What have we been doing good? That's good. Let's start there, right? And then move forward into the game.
With West Virginia's front seven, I know we talked about the personnel a little bit, but what kind of stood out to you about them watching them play against a Pitt offensive line that is really, really good?
Mm-hmm. Well, their front, and this speaks to their defense, schematically overall, is they're a very, very multiple group. Like their front seven, they do a lot of different things, and their back half, they do a lot of things, and they connect the dots pretty well, right? So as an offense, you can put a lot of stress on yourself if you try to see too much, right? If you try to see everything, you're going to end up seeing nothing. And so, it'll be important for our guys to make sure that their what I call game day eyes are focused on what needs to be focused on. Whatever gap they're supposed to have or player, or however they're supposed to run the route, they're concerned about their discipline, their eyes, and we're not falling for the, bam, the old sucker punch, right? Okay, because that's what can happen. So their multiplicity is definitely, something that is unique to them.
I talked to Jalen Daniels earlier. He mentioned that the very next day after Tennessee Tech, he was watching film in West Virginia. You just kind of talk about his preparation and work ethic and how he's helping the rest of the offense heading into West Virginia.
Yep, and so, you know, he does a fantastic job of that, and that's one of my favorite things about him for a guy who really has only played, that was his 5th college football game, right? You know what I mean? Okay, so, you know, we got to keep things in mind. For guys who play 5 college football games, to be able to come in and say, I'm going to start working ahead for the next opponent already, shows a sign of his maturity, which when you guys talk to him, you know those sort of things, right? I mean, he is that kind of guy. He has, you know, he wants to be a pro, right? And in every sense of the word, pros prepare, they move on. They don't sit and relish in how good of a game they just played. The pros go, here's the things that we need to work on, you know, and that was a message to the whole offense. So to your point about how, you know, how does that influence the other players? If a guy can throw, how many incompletions did he have? 3? If he can throw 3 incompletions in a game and be critical of himself, then that allows the other players to be vulnerable enough to say, hey, you know what, I got to improve too. And so one of the things that we said is what we need to focus on is not our successes, but what do we need to work on to improve and get better. And I gave him an example. I said, as a coach, I mean, heck, man, you know, we rip off an 80-yard run. I said, I love that, man. That's great football. I sit there, I keep watching it, rewinding it, and I'm like, oh, look at that play. That is fun to watch, you know. But, hey, what about the one that got stuffed for 0? You know, what happened here? And how are we going to grow and evaluate that? So for him to do that by example, for him to bring other players with, you know, on the offense and watch film and do whatever, those are the kind of things that you want within your culture, right, in terms of preparation. Because you have to do more than just what we do in practice, right, or what we just do in our meetings.
Hey, Andy, after a big game like that, when you guys are piling up the yards and the points, are there a couple things you look back on and say, hey guys, here's some areas that we do need to improve on, although it looked good, and were there any of those?
No doubt. Yeah. Well, you know, turnovers, right? You know, I mean, that was a critical one right out the gate. You know, and we talk about wanting to avoid playing bad football, and that's the worst kind of ball, right? So how they happen, why they happen, to address it, to point it out on film, and to say, hey, listen, this is when we talk about maybe the depth of the route or the angle or where your eyes need to be or your drop as a quarterback or how we carried the ball or whatever it is. It's, you know, I use the examples, you know, as a teacher, I say to the guys, I go, hey, here we are, right? We talk about mastering the mundane as an offense, right? Doing the mundane things well. Drill work can be very mundane to work on the fundamentals. When you go out there and we make a mistake, I present to the players, said, as a coach and a teacher, what does that tell me? That just tells me we need to keep doing it. We have to do it more, right? We have to keep doing it. We don't have it figured out yet. And so any of those little mistakes that you've talked about, even though kind of what we're discussing here, you have success, it's easy to just kind of forget about that and kind of just smile and pat each other in the back and go, okay, here we go. I think great programs who are very process-oriented are always going to be critical of themselves and say, here's what we need to improve on.
And then as a tight ends coach, what did you think of your group? How did they grade out?
They were pretty consistent, you know what I mean? Mason had whatever, 2 catches, you know, good first down in that 2-minute drive, and then the touchdown down, you know, in the red zone to end the drive, which was great. I think they did a pretty good job of blocking the C and D gap, you know what I mean? It's been a multiple group, and I envision, you know, that continuing, that trend, right, for all those guys.
Jalen seemed to get the ball out pretty quick a lot of the night, almost as if, you know, it was pitch and catch. Like he even mentioned, it's kind of like practice out there. Is that by design? You want him to get it out quicker, and did he execute the way you wanted to see there?
Well, the longer it holds the ball back there, the more likely it is the protection's going to break down. So yeah, we do like to get the ball out of rhythm and timing as much as we can. We try to practice that way, and you know, maybe set up schemes and design so that his, you know, he's got one stimulus, one response, get the ball out if you have it. I think what I was most excited about for him in the game is that there were multiple times where he was able to work through progressions and able, you know, there's a few explosive plays that he, you know, hey, 1, 2, 3 balls out, 20-yard gain, which is fantastic, right? That's kind of a big deal, you know, and the fact that the protection held up well enough for that to occur was a great sign, and that he was able to go through it speaks to his ability to process and how he's maturing that way.
As we were walking in, or some of us at least, they've heard Country Roads playing on the speaker at practice. Is that on purpose? Just the DJ changing it?
Yeah, you go in any environment, you know, I think, shout out Jimmy Lee, our video coordinator. He's already worked ahead, and every opponent fight song that we're going to play in the road and what they play in their stadiums all queued up, ready to go for whatever we're doing that week. So, you know, preparing an environment that we think we're going to go into.
All right. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, Coach.
Hey, thanks everybody. Have a good day.
Thanks.